have a proposition I'd like to discuss with you. I've chartered an airplane to fly us over Isla Sorna, and we'd like you to be our guide. We'd love to make a contribution to your research here.
It could almost be paradise.
My God, I'd forgotten.
We have a landing strip up
You
ahead.
cannot land on this island.
Oh my God!
But in this forbidden place, where man has tampered with nature,
This is how you make dinosaurs?
This is how you play God.
something unexpected has evolved.
They can talk to each other.
To a degree we never imagined.
On July 18th,
You probably won't get off this island alive.
it's not just a walk in the park.
They set a trap. They actually set a trap.
Welcome back to Geek Channel 8. I'm Eric.
And I'm Will. The latest gaming thing, I don't know if you know this, but there's a new Dungeon Master's Guide.
Do you have it already?
Well, no, but I guess Dungeons and Dragons is like so many other things that's media. They will drip out dribs and drabs through the content creators because they know that the people who are most obsessed or will hang on every word. So like a lot of the content creators, they have a copy of it and they're allowed to talk about it.
That sucks, by the way. There's a rumor that they've been actually paid to review this stuff, but I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I cannot say, I don't think I'm going to buy the new DMG, but I do obsess over it, so there's that.
I'm in a weird position right now with regards to this because I was never an all-in person on the 5th edition, which has been around since 2012.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that they sort of reached their peak development with 3.5. I really think 3.5 was kind of the high watermark for Dungeons and Dragons.
I am actually surprised to hear you say that because, I thought you were going to go really hardcore grognard and be like, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons was the best.
Honestly, I'm not a fan of the Dungeons and Dragons system in general. I think RuneQuest is better. I think that Fantasy Hero is better. I think that there are a bunch of other better systems. I haven't played Pathfinder, but a lot of people think that's better. Another thing that drives me absolutely nuts, and I keep forgetting about it, and it's still true with this edition, which, let's face it, we're going to call 5.5. I don't care what they claim. We're going to call it 5.5. Anyway, my problem with 5.5 was the same problem I had with 5th edition and maybe even earlier, which is that, and this is my grognard thing, as a DM, we're going to rotate DM duties on this particular game. If one of the other DMs shows up, they'll play the NPC.
Oh, yeah.
But we're using a pre-published adventure, and I decided to create the full character sheet for the NPC. I had the same problem the last time I tried to do something like this as a DM. I don't like that it plays by two different rules, a rule for the players and a rule for the DMs. Like it should be the same rules. So you get the stat block for an NPC, and it's like a ranger, and it's like a 15th level, 15 D8s hit dice because I guess it's a monster, but like actual rangers, PCs are D10, hit dice.
This is definitely the influence of every single online, computer role-playing game has been influenced directly by Dungeons and Dragons. But at this point, they turn around and they influence the game itself. It goes back and forth between them. You're in a computer game, your character is fully realized, but nobody else is. The NPCs are not, right? They're not going to be fully realized. They're not, you don't need them to be.
There's another thing that I get really grognard about, which was we have a fairly big group and it slows down combat a lot. And like one of the villains had cast this spell, Moonbeam. In the Moonbeam, you take damage or something. I don't know if you're in the Moonbeam, right? Well, then someone else, in one of the more clever old school ways of dealing with stuff, someone came up with I'm going to cast an area of effect of darkness where the moonbeam is, you know? So then it's turned into a whole big thing of looking up online and through rule books and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Can darkness counteract moonbeam? And it was taking too long. I'm like, you're the DM, just make it up, you know, whatever you choose, that's
Right.
what it is, you know? It's
Right.
like rulings instead of rules. I remember before even dungeon masters were called dungeon masters, they were called referees. And it's just like, that's what you do. And if maybe you find there is a published rule on it, then you can like note that for future occurrences. But in the moment, keep the combat going. Don't like stop to like look up a bunch of rules.
It probably wouldn't work according to the rules. On the other hand, how cool is that? So, you know, there are some systems out there. Well, I'm thinking means of masterminds in particular. So, on the one hand, it's super complicated in a way to make a character, but it has a way of adjudicating that so quickly. I love that. It's like, hey, you know what? You have this much in Moonbeam, and you have that much in Darkness. Compare them. Maybe do a roll off. But yeah, no, I think some of what we're talking about is built into the game as it is, and some of it is culture. And by the way, congratulations, since we both know you were pretty much the forever DM. I'm so glad to hear that you are getting to play for most of the time.
Sometimes, yeah. Okay, let's go back for only like half that time. We're gonna go back about 20 some years to 2001.
Oh, wow.
So in January 9th to be exact, Apple Inc. launched iTunes. The application was both a media player and a media library. February of 2001, the Human Genome Project published its first draft of the human genome sequence. March 24th, Apple released the Mac OS X or 10 operating system for Mac computers. I think they originally wanted everyone to call it OS 10, but used a Roman numeral, and now everyone calls it OS X. One of those things. April 7th, the NASA orbiter 2001 Mars Odyssey launched a Delta II rocket. May 24th, the 15-year-old Sherpa Temba Churi, I don't know how to pronounce it, becomes the youngest person to ever summit Everest. June 7th of 2001, the United Kingdom had its general election, and Tony Blair and the Labour Party won in a landslide. Second landslide victory. And then July 18th of 2001, Jurassic Park 3 is released. So let's talk about how Jurassic Park 3 came to be. I'm not going to go too deep into the details because, like all sequels, it came to be because there was money to be made, right? So 1993, Jurassic Park was released. Joe Johnston, who was mostly like an effects guy on the Star Wars stuff, he was interested in directing a potential sequel. He was not a bad choice to take over this franchise. He had done like Jumanji, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids,
Yes.
The Rocketeer. So he had some chops in making this kind of youth-oriented adventure film stuff. In some ways, I would argue that he's better at directing this kind of thing than Spielberg. But we will get back to that. Michael Crichton wasn't going to write yet another novel. That wasn't going to happen. So they brought him in to kick around ideas, and he had none.
Yeah. Like, look, guys, the well is dry.
Spielberg was also super busy taking over yet a different project. He was finishing Kubrick's last film, AI, Artificial Intelligence. They brought in a guy named Craig Rosenberg, who was an Australian writer-director who had written Hotel de Love, which is like a romantic comedy. So he started writing the first draft in June of 99. He had done some previous work for DreamWorks, I guess, but Spielberg had given full creative freedom to Johnston. Johnston said Spielberg told him that he strongly pointed out, I shouldn't try to copy him, unquote. So when Johnston saw Rosenberg's draft, he rejected it and said it read like a bad episode of Friends.
Whoa.
So then they brought in a guy named Peter Buckman. I don't really know anything about this guy. And he was hired to rewrite Rosenberg's draft. He had some really cool ideas. So it was going to be like there are a bunch of mysterious killings on the mainland, and there was like an investigation, and they discover that dinosaurs are behind it. Then there's another parallel story going on of Alan Grant and Billy, his graduate assistant,
Yeah.
and a family crashing on Isla Sorna. It is kind of interesting because it was like the US State Department was like trying to have these hearings to take control of the islands, like to have them become US territories, which the US would totally do if there were
Absolutely
dinosaur
do.
islands. So it totally made sense. And they're like, yes, this is the threat, and this keeps coming up again and again. We need to be in control of these islands. That sounds like what his script was about. Now, this is only from reading third-hand accounts, so I don't know, but it sounded very interesting. Unfortunately, Johnston thought that it was too complicated,
Yeah, fair, fair.
especially how are they going to get Alan Grant to go back to an island of dinosaurs? Now, they knew he was going to be involved in it because Sam Neill had already signed on, and he was never quite happy with his performance in the first film.
Oh, really?
And he thought that he could do better. William H. Macy appears in this, and he originally turned it down, but he was working on a film called Focus with Laura Dern, and she encouraged him to be in it,
Ah, cool.
even though she was not involved in it yet. They eventually did reach out to her to have a
Yeah.
cameo in it, and she didn't really want or think she should be involved for just a cameo, and Spielberg sweetened the deal by having her like play a pivotal role in saving the day,
Yeah.
and then she agreed to do it. That plus the fact that she heard that the script was going to be written by Payne and Taylor, two scriptwriters who she had worked with before. Let's talk about how Payne and Taylor got involved. It's Jim Taylor and Alexander Payne. Once Johnston thought that this was too complicated, he was sitting around brainstorming and was talking to David Koepp, who, if you remember, David Koepp had written the screenplays for the previous Jurassic Park films. And he said, why don't you just make it a rescue mission? And they were like, that's it. Nice, simple. That's to the point. That's what Johnston wanted. So then they got Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor to write it. Much like I thought that previous guy, Craig Rosenberg, was an odd choice. These guys are also very odd choices to write the script. They weren't fans of the Jurassic Park series. They weren't fans of action films. They did like Meet the Parents and some other films like that.
Okay.
Oh, I should mention that while all this is going on, they had already started production based on the previous script.
What?
So they had spent $18 million building sets and all of that kind of stuff. They had to find a way to incorporate a bunch of the stuff that they had already built, and
You gotta use this. We've already paid for it.
Yeah. And they had created storyboards and all sorts of stuff. So in some ways, this movie is a pastiche of other stuff. Also, there were things that they wanted to use in the first two films that they didn't get to do, like a boat on a river thing and pteranodons, which they had wanted to use and teased in the previous one. And in fact, Spielberg told them they had to use pteranodons. So Payne and Taylor wrote in a small part for Laura Dern, but they did not want them to be a couple, nor did Johnston. Johnston said that I didn't want to see them as a couple anymore. For one thing, I don't think they look like a couple, and Laura Dern doesn't look like she's aged for the past 15 years. This is a weird thing. Like, there was a lot of talk after Jurassic Park came out about the age gap. And
Really?
apparently Laura Dern and Sam Neill, they're 20 years apart in age. He's 20 years older than her. And apparently they didn't know how big their age gap actually was until they read about it afterwards. They never asked each other their age, right?
Man, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I didn't think anything of their age gap, especially it's like, oh yeah, she would have been his graduate student. That's how that would have worked. I'm surprised that was an issue back then. But yeah, she did not look like she had aged very much at all. If anything, I think she might even look better in this movie. It was amazing. I mean, kudos to them. I think it was more interesting this way. You could see the bones of what they were planning with that from the very brief intro, and it played in perfectly. We all know he was not wanting to have kids.
Yeah. I would have liked to have seen that like more developed instead of we'll get to it, but they give us like a substitute couple. Anyway, Laura Dern had worked on Citizen Ruth with Payne and Taylor, and so yet which is another comedy film. So I don't know what they were thinking when it came to the writing of the script, but like all of the writers that they were looking at were all like comedy writers and drama writers, and none of them were action movie writers. So that one thing, and also the sort of we're gonna cobble together stuff that we have to use because it didn't get used in past films. So those two things I think were hamstringing this from the beginning. Apparently, according to Payne, when they had seen the film, they're like, we gave them a new script and then we saw the movie and it's all action. They took the rest out. So ultimately, the writing credit went to Buckman. But the thing is, a final draft of the script was never completed during the production. The first act mostly was there, the middle portion was not, and the ending had yet to be written.
How common is this?
Well, not too common unless you're someone I think that wields a lot of power, like Spielberg's the producer. Like we know this from Jaws, like going all the way back to his Jaws days. He's a seat of the pants kind of guy, you know? So here's some of the hell that the actors went through. Now, Téa Leoni, who was David Duchovny's wife at the time, may still be, I don't know. He saw the marks on her body and was like, are they whipping you on this production? Leone said that more of her makeup was used to cover real bruises than to create fake ones.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing because, it's like these are all people who were pretty top notch. They were all famous in something. They'd all been in things that, I could recognize. I'm surprised they let her even do that, the things that would cause that. But more power to them because it didn't look good. So,
as we said, Crichton wasn't really involved very much. He got it based on characters created by credit, but there were some scenes that were taken from stuff that he had written, like the pterosaur aviary. The T-Rex's attempted attack on the river raft were in the novel. Now, it was replaced with a Spinosaurus in this. Spinosaurus is the big bad because actually they broke the T-Rex. So they decided to replace it with a Spinosaur. This upset a lot of fans because, kids want the T-Rex, right? Even though Spinosaur is actually pretty much of a badass too. And according to Horner, the dinosaur expert who worked on the paleontologist who worked on the first two, according to him, remember, he had the whole thing about the T-Rex as a scavenger, not a predator. He's like Spinosaurus. That's an actual predator. So in his opinion, that should have been the big bad all along anyway.
Oh yeah, I think there was another one, another dinosaur they were considering. Looked a lot like Spinosaurus, but did not have that sail on its back. And visually, that is very distinct. So I think that's why they chose that one.
Another thing that it changed as far as getting dinosaurs right is between the previous films and this film, paleontology had discovered that the raptors probably had feathers.
Yeah.
Now, that was, feathers don't really fossilize very well. So I don't know how they discovered this. They, of course, couldn't completely change the look of the velociraptors because people know what they look like from the previous films. But they added some quills and tiny feather-like structures on them to sort of start evolving their look to be more like what science believes Velociraptors looks like now.
Yeah, which is really cool when you think about it. It's like, oh, honestly, Crichton tried to use the best science of his time, and they based the movies off of that. But science marches on.
Okay, let's talk about how this did at the box office. It opened on July 18th of 2001 to $19 million. At the time, it had the second highest Wednesday opening of any film after Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. It grossed $50.3 million during its 3-day opening weekend. When it opened, it had the third highest July opening weekend behind Men in Black and the X-Men. And it was the first time that 4 consecutive films had an opening weekend of over $45 million. Those plus Planet of the Apes, Rush Hour 2, and American Pie 2. It was also one of the 4 consecutive Universal films of 2001 to gross $40 million in their opening weekends. The others were The Mummy Returns and The Fast and the Furious and American Pie 2. But despite all that, it was still the lowest grossing film in the Jurassic Park franchise.
Wow.
Critics were very mixed at the time. Retrospectively, critics have gone back and looked at it, and some have changed their opinion more positive. Entertainment Weekly in 2018 wrote, quote, "What the plot lacks in credibility, it makes up for with relatability." And the magazine also said it was the only film in the series that, quote, "has zero to do with scientific stupidity or sinister corporate forces," unquote. And that it, quote, "was perhaps the most narratively original," unquote, film of them all. And a big defender of this film over the years has been Sam Neill, who has multiple times said that the film's been dismissed too easily, that it's pretty damn good. And aside from the final 10 minutes, which he thinks was a bit of a hurried ending, other than that, he has been quoted as saying that it's actually a pretty good film and hasn't been treated fairly.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I got you there.
All right, what do you got?
We're back at candy bars, crunchy candy bars. Without going too in detail, yes, there is a scene where they're hungry and they acquire candy bars. I'm like, yeah, well, they're not showing anything. I guess the whole crackle thing's over with.
No.
Well,
I
guess
spotted
what?
a crackle.
No, I'm pretty sure that was a Nestle, but it was there.
Ah,
Yeah, which is like, hey,
Crunch
you
Bar.
can't just switch it up, but of course they can. I think the association. I wonder how many kids just like we associate eating this chocolate with being a T-Rex and going, I don't know, maybe. But the other thing, is that they keep on going back to these places that it's enough to make anyone need a drink, and they actually suggested a great drink. Now, after reading about it, I was like, this sounds a lot like an Arnold Palmer, but basically it's a drink called an ice pick. Okay, so it is vodka. It's got some extra sugar in there. It's got lemon juice, and it has iced tea. Okay, yeah, that sounds a lot like that. But the guys coming in when they're gonna sit down with Macy and his wife. We'll get to that later. It seems like a thing that if you're not drinking beers, but you just came in from a dusty work, it would be the perfect drink. And then I bet you if we dig deeper, there's a whole thing about the crackle versus the Nestle. But yeah, it's there.
Hershey's Crackle versus Nestle Crunch. I blame E.T. for all of this. Like, this is a Spielberg thing, and like he had such success with the whole partnership with Reese's Pieces that
Really
is, like,
did. And they made bank on that. And because, frankly, those were terrible candies. But man, I remember eating them just because they were associated with the movie. Yeah. Eat candy, drink booze.
That's kind of our recommendation every time we do one of
Yeah,
these.
fair enough.
Well, let's get into talking about the film.
Righteous.
This film opens, there's this boat and it's on the water approaching like the restricted island Isla Sorna or Isla Sorna. I don't know how you say that. There's a guy and a kid and they're parasailing off this boat. And I don't know if the boat has one or two people crewing it, but they're looking at the island, but they all agree they're not going to get too close to the island.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Pretty soon it gets very misty and they can no longer see the boat that is towing them. And then they come through the mist and we see that the crew has been attacked or something, presumably by an animal. We don't know. It looks messed up. This is one of those things that is never explained.
They never go back to that, but yeah.
And it crashes on a reef. So they like cut themselves loose and they end up parasailing down and gliding, presumably to land on Isla Sorna. And that is the last we hear about them for a little while.
I actually like that they never explain it. It's good world building. And then the other part is like, yeah, the panic that these two have while they're up there, like even like the older guy, he is actually kind of like yelling at the kid, like, cut it loose, undo the thing. I mean, not angry, just freaking the hell out. Yeah, I thought that was pretty darn good. Yeah, I liked it.
The strong suggestion is that it is a dinosaur
Yeah.
in the ocean. If there's a dinosaur in the ocean, that means the dinosaurs are no longer restricted to just that area.
Exactly. I love that. Well, I mean, but this is not the first time I use this. In the second movie, when the freighter arrives in that classic, sort of, beautifully reference to the Dracula movie, where the freighter arrives, the crew is dead, but it's clearly not been done by the T-Rex. So it's like, oh, there's something in the ocean that picked them right off their boat, wrecked their boat, left nothing behind, and they never deal with it in this movie. So maybe they'll come up later. I mean,
It will come up later, but not in this movie. Time passes. We don't know how much time. I don't think it tells us yet. Alan Grant is doing lectures to pretty packed rooms about his Velociraptor research. And all anyone wants to ask him at the end is questions about Isla Nublar, or whatever, and the dinosaur escape in San Diego. He refuses to talk about those. Eventually, he goes and has dinner at the house of Ellie, Laura Dern.
Yeah.
This is where we find out she finally has that kid she wanted with another guy. And they talk about how velociraptors were much smarter and more socially advanced than they had even suspected beyond primates.
Yes.
Back at the dig in Montana, we are introduced to his new graduate assistant, a guy named Billy Brennan. Now, there's a scene where Billy Brennan is showing him some new tech, and he remember we talked about 3D printers? Like in when we were talking about this stuff before, he uses a 3D printer to replicate a velociraptor larynx. This is Chekhov's larynx. It'll come back
it really is.
later on. We were talking about how long 3D printers have been around. Although they don't refer to it as a 3D printer, they call it a rapid prototyper, which is another name for them.
Basically, he's like, I am not interested in these, quote, dinosaurs, which are just monsters, these living ones. The real science is in the rocks, right?
Which he's kind of right, because the modern ones, they had to fill in the gaps in the genetic code, right?
Yeah.
They were genetically engineered creatures that used dinosaur DNA. So then there's this wealthy couple that come to say they're going to fund Grant's research. And he's been down this road before with John Hammond. So it's like, hell no. No, I am not going to go back to the island. And you promising to fund my research isn't going to do it. But they basically decide that, unlike Hammond, who had a specific figure in mind, I'll give you $30,000 or whatever. Right. These guys are willing to write a blank check. They're like, you tell us what you want, They're just gonna have him be a guide on their aerial flyover of the island.
You really see him. It's like I don't want to do this, but that money could let me play with rocks for the rest of my life.
We also had previously noted that someone had called some mercenaries who seemed pretty like bargain basement mercenaries. And we find out when we see them on this flight that it's this couple, Paul and Amanda Kirby, who had hired them. I forgot. Grant is awoken from a dream he has on the plane.
Yeah.
This is one of the more bizarre segments in all of the Jurassic Park films. There's this talking velociraptor.
But I love it because it shows his anxiety, his fear. He's not like, this is not light for him. He's like,
This is one of the great things about this particular movie is some of the really off the wall crap that happens in it, and this is one of those moments.
Actually, it harkened back because he wakes up to an empty plane, right? It's like an Indiana Jones moment. Wait, what? Everybody else left me. I'm screwed. Yeah.
So they're talking about putting the plane down, and he starts freaking out, and one of the mercenaries hacks him in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Possibly with a gun, I'm not sure. And he's unconscious. The next thing you know, he's waking up and asking Reed, please tell me they didn't land the plane. And sure enough, they landed the plane. But they're like calling off on megaphone, Eric, who it turns out is their son, who was the boy that was lost 8 weeks ago on this island.
Yeah.
And Dr. Grant's like, don't do that. Don't do that, and sure enough, this megaphone thing does turn out to be a bad idea, and the couple of mercenaries come running back out of the jungle. 2 of the 3 that went in come running out, and they're like, we gotta go, we gotta get on the plane. One of them, by the way, is the black guy.
Yeah,
We'll just mention that because there is the black guy in this. They jump in the plane, they start taking off, and then the last guy comes running out of the jungle. And for whatever reason, they decide they're not going to stop for him. They're about to run him down when coming running out of the jungle comes a Spinosaurus and eats him. And they take off, but they hit the Spinosaurus or something, and they end up crashing anyway.
Yeah, it just goes from one bad thing to the next to the next. It's like, okay, we're alive. Okay. Oh, well, we're stuck in a tree. Okay. Well, wait. We'll get the satellite phone. Where is it? Where is it? Because the radio's not working. Oh, here comes the Spinosaurus. Ah!
And the guy that had the satellite phone got eaten.
Yeah. And just to note, we go from Spinus. Wait, is it a Spinosaurus that attacks him there? I think it might be actually a T-Rex that attacks him in the plane. But basically, they go from being attacked by.
You're right. It was a T-Rex.
Get almost dying. They run off, escape. They think, okay, I think we lost him. Then emerges a Spinosaurus again, and they run back the other way. And then basically, we get to see the Spinosaurus, it's a clash of the Titans, and the Spinosaurus comes out victorious.
This is where it's revealed that nobody is who we thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Grant is not actually an expert on Isla Sorna. He's never been to Isla Sorna.
Mm-hmm.
He's been to Isla Nublar. Second of all, the Kirbys aren't who they said they were. One, they're not a happy couple going on their honeymoon or whatever. They're a divorced couple who don't get along. They're also not rich. Like, he owns a hardware store. and it's like, well, I can, if you ever redo your bathroom or, I can help you out there with your bathroom or your kitchen, So Grant's doubly pissed now because now all this was for nothing, on top of the fact that he's stuck on Dinosaur Island. The mercenary leader, turns out he's not even a mercenary either.
Nope.
He just was the one that put the team together. And then when one person dropped out, he decided to go along as the fourth, take that person's place.
Which follows our previous things of like, some guy who's not supposed to be in the field goes in the field. He's pretty awesome, though. I love that actor. His name's Michael Jeter, I believe is how you pronounce it. And he is Udesky is the name of the character. I knew I was going to enjoy him from the beginning. You might have known him from previously. He did so much work. The man has passed away. He was in The Fisher King. He had a really nice part in that. And great actor.
So they finally run across they run across some eggs that are velociraptor eggs. And now they know that they're velociraptors on this island. And that is bad news. They come across an InGen facility.
Mm-hmm.
And they go in and they're like, oh man, they see like that they had eggs in incubators. And they're like, oh, is this how you make dinosaurs? And Alan Grant, who's now got to be the voice of Ian Malcolm because we don't have an Ian Malcolm. He's like, no, this is how you play God. But while they're looking through this compound, you see this like head of a velociraptor behind a tank.
Yes, they set you up a little bit, but I think it's more of a setup for the character. They have Tia, the only character. She's looking at all the half-formed fetal dinosaurs floating in a jar, and she looks at the one, the next, and then she looks and sees the head of a velociraptor, and she just looks there real close, and then turns out it's not floating in the jar; it's behind it, and it's on. They're after them.
So they have to escape from this compound. They manage to trap the velociraptor in a cage, basically behind a door to a cage. And then it starts like calling out and making noise, calling to the other velociraptors. And they're like, oh,
yeah.
crap, now we're in trouble. So they have to make a run. They escape into a herd of other dinosaurs. But the velociraptors catch Udesky and they kill him, ? But we find out later that he's like still alive, and Grant thinks there's something wrong here, and he's like, it's a trap.
Every step they do a good job establishing the intelligence of these creatures, which is awesome because it's like, well, they're at least as smart as a dog. Wait, no, they're smarter. No, they're really smart. Oh, and they're still horribly deadly. They're like really dangerous.
Basically, Grant gets separated from the rest of them. He's surrounded by them, and you're like, oh, there's no getting out of this. He is screwed. And then suddenly these gas grenades come landing all around him. And you're like, oh, the cavalry has arrived. Well, the cavalry turns out to be Eric, the kid from the parasailing thing.
Yeah.
We did see that the other guy died. They found his body in the tree earlier. Eric managed to survive. He found a bunker and hid out in it, and he takes Grant there. And that's where we get the scene where they're eating the chocolate bars and tins of food and stuff.
Yeah, he's pretty much gone feral. But, it's cool. I mean, it's like, oh yeah. He has a whole thing where it's like, Sam Neill's like, what's this? And he's like, oh, hey, careful with that. That's T-Rex pee. And he's like,
in an Erlenmeyer flask. And I'm like, he's like, how did you get it? And he's like, don't ask. And now all I want to know for the rest of the movie is how the hell you managed to get T-Rex pee in a flask.
But yeah, they established that stuff is like, it's like, oh yeah, it drives off some of them, some of the dinosaurs, but on the other hand, it attracts the big Spinosaurus one. Yeah, so this kid knows stuff. The kid was cool. I thought and I think every movie they said, here's a kid who's smart and knows a little something about dinosaurs, right?
I don't know. Was he older than the kids in the first movie? He certainly seemed way more mature, and I liked him a lot better. He had actually read Grant's book and Ian Malcolm's book, so they got a little joke in there about how he thought Ian Malcolm was like,
man, that guy just goes on about chaos. Is chaos this, chaos that?
And so, of course, Alan Grant loves that about him, Then the next morning, they find the rest of them. They all, reunite, and Spinosaurus attacks them again. Yeah. And they run, and they eventually go hide in another structure. In a quiet moment while they're hiding out in this other structure, we find out that Billy had taken 2 of the velociraptor eggs.
Yeah.
At first, they're just going to throw these eggs into this river that's below this structure. And then Dr. Grant just says, well, we can't do that either, because if they catch us without them, what are they going to do to us? In other words, they'll be pissed and kill them.
Right.
So they go out into the, outside the structure, and it takes them a little while to realize that this area that they're in is a big bird cage, but it doesn't have birds in it. It has pteranodons. I don't want to get into it too deeply, but there's a lot that goes on with avoiding these pteranodons. And at one point, Eric gets picked up and carried off by one, and Billy has to go rescue him using the parasail. It's a little unbelievable, the parachute rescue.
It's banana pants. It's like, I'm like, it's one of those, it's like, it was more at a certain point. At first, I was like, okay, he's just going to use that to get to him. But no, he actually picks him up. And it's like, how much airtime? That was a lot of airtime. Just saying.
There's some weird parts in this movie. And there's one where they're like on this catwalk. After something weird goes down, you get this almost like a spit take reaction as like one of the pteranodons like turns around and looks them dead in the eye. They escaped downriver on a boat that they had seen from above when they were in the aviary.
Yeah.
This is where we get very Jumanji-esque, and they're on this steam boat going down a river, and that's when they hear the Spinosaurus again, or rather they hear the satellite phone again, which doesn't make sense. And then they need a way to call. Grant says stop, and that's where they find piles of poop. And so by now it has pooped out the satellite phone. And they they start reaching into the poop and dragging things out, bones and other stuff. And they do get the satellite phone, and they're super happy to answer it. And it's a telemarketer.
Now, this is another one of those really weird parts. So they answer it, and then they are approached by another dinosaur, and they freeze, and then it's like, oof, and it turns away because it's like, you smell like poop. It was a really weird, like.
That's another one of those weird moments in the film. Yeah. There is a fight with the Spinosaur on the river, and they almost lose the satellite phone. They know they can't call the U.S. Embassy. And so Grant decides to call Ellie. But Charlie, the little kid that we met in the beginning, he answers the phone, and he finally gets through him. He's like, get your mom. The mom's nowhere around. So the little kid doesn't go out the front door, and then he's walking back, and then he sees on the TV Barney. Another kind of off the wall scene where he's like got the phone in his hand and he's watching Barney, this like cute dinosaur, which I really appreciated that they did that. Meanwhile, the real Spinosaur is like attacking them, on the other side of the phone,
Oh, and so while this is happening, he does finally get to talk to her. The other thing that happens is that we get to see the dad on the island, seemingly sacrifice himself to save his family, save his kid, save his wife, distracting the Spinosaurus and seemingly plummeted to his death.
This is where I had to bring this up. I'm officially banning this. This trope pisses me off. Somehow gasoline or something leaks out of the boat, and when Dr. Grant's like fumbling around trying to find stuff, he comes across the flare gun. The flare guns actually fell to the bottom of the river, and he dives down and finds it. It's completely wet. The flares are wet, but whatever. That doesn't matter. And he manages to shoot it and ignite the water, which that's not how rivers especially work, where water keeps moving. But even if it was a lake, I don't think it works that way. You got to have a pretty high concentrations of stuff for the river or the lake to actually catch fire. Yes, it's happened to the Cuyahoga River in real life. Yes, it happens occasionally. We are officially banning this trope. I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want to see like we're of course referring to The Shallows, where
Yeah.
She manages to save herself by igniting the whale blubber.
Oh my gosh.
with
Yeah.
the
I mean, it is like, it's like you would think, because, okay, just to step back for a second. Of course, the mercenaries, before they even left, we show them like with like insanely powerful guns you could use to blow up like an airplane. And of course, those don't work. But if you have your flare gun, then there will always, if you have a flare gun, there will always be enough flammable liquid on the water to blah blah blah. After they deal with the Spinosaurus, they are confronted by the raptors, and they're surrounded. So what do? They're on the beach, surrounded. They give them back their eggs, but for some reason, it has to be Tia Leone who gives back the eggs because she's the mom, I guess. So it's the mom dinosaur, the mom who came to protect herself, and she gives back the eggs, and they actually depart in peace. Though it's not clear they would have done that except for,
well, he also blows like he blows through the larynx. The
yes.
Dr. Grant but so I think somehow that.
Yeah, it even says, don't just blow it, do the help sound that we heard them do earlier.
So at the very end, we'll wrap this up real quick because the movie wraps up really quick. Somehow Ellie has the powers of like the president. She manages to get the Navy and the Marines, a whole platoon of them, to show up to rescue these people. Like, who is she? Who is Ellie secretly that she has this much power to like get the whole armed forces there that fast?
So this is actually a Chekhov husband moment. So they established that he doesn't say exactly what he does, but he works for the State Department way back in the beginning.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why she's able to be like, darling, you have to save my friend. And,
I think we can all agree this ending is way too Deus Ex Machina and way too fast.
Yeah.
The movie is only 90 minutes long. And I think, they were out of money. They were out of ideas. They hadn't written the end of the script. They're like, we got to wrap this up before we go over budget. And they teased what I have wanted since the second movie. To this day, I still haven't got it. There've been like 2 or 3 more sequels. I've seen a couple of them, or 1 or 2 of them. All I want, and this goes all the way back to King Kong, the 1930s King Kong. I just want to see like aliens. I want to see a bunch of Marines like sent to clear out the island. That's their job. It's like, I want to see like military guys versus dinos. That would be awesome. Why doesn't someone make that movie?
The question is, where do you create the conflict? I guess you could have conflict with the monsters, even with aliens. Human hubris. Human hubris is the key, right?
So the human hubris it's the whole Escape from New York thing. The president's plane has gone down, or the vice president, someone important enough to send the military for real,
right,
has crashed on this island, and they're like, all right, this is what we know about this island. We got to get him out. And while we're at it, kill everything. Kill everything. And now you get to see people with machine guns firing at T-Rexes, and T-Rexes going crazy and throwing people around, and like Brontosauruses stomping people. And,
honestly, I think the closest you're going to get to that is Iron Skies 2.
This is a very polarizing film. A lot of people hate it. There are some people that say it is the worst film in the entire series. I disagree with that. There are other people who really praise it. Both William H. Macy and Sam Neill have defended it. And of course, the director. Now, they all have a vested interest in that. But there are also critics who think that this is a good one, especially because it lacks the whole trope of the evil corporation and all of that. What do you think?
Okay, it's weird tone shifts. These movies just have weird tone shifts anyway. It just seems like that. I'm accepting that as part and parcel to it. This is my bottom line. I am ready to watch the next one. Obviously, it hasn't ruined the experience for me. I still am like, oh God, I wonder what they'll do next. I enjoy the dinosaurs. It's kind of like you want to see what ridiculous set piece will happen next, even when they break out the flare guns. If I was going to give it a rating, I would give it a B-, which is plain enough for me to say, let's go do this again. So, we'll set that up because we're just going to watch all of them, Eric. That's my plan now.
All right. Well, for me, all I want from these films is cool dino attacks.
Yeah.
And this delivers. As long as you keep giving me that, I'll put up with all the other crap. This film delivers on that. Every dino attack, 3 Spinosaurus attacks.
Yeah.
One where they had where they're running by the fence and there's a conveniently located hole that they go through, which the ending of that kind of annoyed me that happened, but okay, whatever. 3 Spinosaurus attacks, multiple raptor attacks, a pteranodon attack, all of that. It's good enough that I'm still in it.
Yeah, honestly, I think that where the first film really shines is the setup. Okay, you get the setup, you get the thinking, you get all that stuff. First one, you get the human hubris too, but second one is just evil corporation. Pretty much is the jam. This one is like, hey, you know what? We're dispensing with most of all that, and we're just going to go in with, like I said, I'm like, I want to see what you do next. Let's see what happens next. I want to see what happens with there are apparently dinosaurs in the water. Huh. Oh, well, how about that? Oh, and we should mention that pterodons, the pterodactyls got free. I know there's no such thing as pterodactyls anymore, just like Pluto's not a planet, but that's okay because the pterodactyls got free. We got to see them flying alongside that plane at the end. Okay, so
they're pteranodons, which are a thing. Pterodactyls are not, but pteranodons are.
There will always be pterodactyls in my heart. So anyway,
okay,
but yeah, so yeah, I want to see what happens next, and I think that's pretty much a good for a franchise. Honestly, I mean, as far as they're concerned, that's an A+.
That wraps this up. If you want to write to us, we're GC8 Podcast, letter G, letter C, number 8, podcast@gmail.com. Please tell a couple of people about the podcast. This is all just a labor of love, but the only way we can keep doing it is if people tell other people about it. Until next time, this is Eric.
And this is Will.
Signing off. We don't even have a Patreon. Maybe we'll do that. People keep telling us to do that. Maybe we'll do that. But
wait, I heard about a way to make money. OnlyFans?
Yeah, we're not going to do that either.